my user is doing that, then that's what I want to verify. Since no users are using HTML-Unit as their day-to-day browser, anything simulated is not going to work. So it's good for some things, but ultimately no, it's just a simulation. It's not the real end-to-end test. So again, that small, medium, large world, HTML-Unit is great for kind of medium or perhaps small, but more like medium tests. But it's basically kind of two different domains. That was our first attempt. The second attempt was not a released project, but anyway, the internal name was Driftwood, written by a coworker of mine at the time, Andrew McCormick in Chicago. And yeah, it was a Mozilla extension. And yeah, we didn't release it, but it kind of took my 50 lines of JavaScript and HTML thing and actually kind of made it into like a real kind of tool people could use. I mean, really the problem, so we proved the point that we could actually automate the browser, and but it couldn't use it for IE and Safari, and that was really my driving thing. And this actually, ironically, will come back because we actually now have something called Selenium IDE for Firefox, which is a Firefox-specific tool. But at the time, I did not want something browser-specific. So we kind of go back and forth on this browser-specific versus browser-general kind of a thing. That was our second attempt. But really, I needed something cross-browser. The third attempt was looking at something that does run cross-browser. That was called JSUnit by Edward Hyatt. He works for Pivotal Labs in San Francisco. And the big thing about that is that it's really just meant for unit tests, just a little bit of code, and it'll just do some assertions on that. And it was not meant to really touch user interface. Really, the specific point where I had to kind of fork or drift away from JSUnit was when you clicked some link that went for an indeterminate amount of time, you had to wait for a new page load. That was something JSUnit couldn't handle. I kind of needed to kind of asynchronously wait, and JSUnit just didn't do it. So all of the ugly guts of Selenium was really getting this notion where when you click a button, you have to wait an indeterminate amount of time and then go on. That's really was the essence of Selenium. So JSUnit is great for testing one page, but Selenium is meant to test multiple pages in sequence. And that's kind of what JSUnit looks like. So the other problem with it is like, well, I wanted to actually see the user interface. I didn't want to just see a green bar, even though green bars are great, but I wanted to see what it was doing. The fourth attempt was looking around at the time. This guy, Ward Cunningham. I don't know if any of you guys heard of him. Really super famous for the wiki. A little bit also famous for Fit, at least within the testing circle. And he really wanted to emphasize functional testing. Fit is a framework for integrated testing. So to call it the Fit framework is slightly redundant, but anyway. The weird thing about that is that, well, actually, I'll show you a slide, 2 slides. This is the, I first tried to tackle, this is the API. 4 methods, start, enter, press, and check. And I didn't like this because if you want to check a check button, check actually in his world meant verify something. But if I wanted to check a checkbox, I didn't know what that meant. Is that verifying it or is that actually checking it? So right away, I was not happy with the API. And he's very clear in the Fit docs that if you don't implement this spec, you fork the project. So I'm like, okay, fine. You forced my hand. The other thing is this is kind of the syntax of a test. And I really like this until I realized when you click that little button, it actually goes and does a whole bunch of stuff on the server and then comes back with a page saying, done, ta-da, the tests are run. And again, I had this feeling, well, what happened? I mean, you said you did it, but I want to see it. So that was my frustration with Fit, is a little bit of the API was too limiting, and also there was too much magic happening behind the curtain. So that was starting to be the essence of these requirements for Selenium and cross-browser as well. So I think well, I made those points. Yeah, so I basically had to fork Fit. That's what it came down to. And this is what we kind of came up with the very first version. This is we now call Celanese, the little domain-specific language. You can kind of see the first. Actually, you could do this in Excel if you so dared. The first column is the command. I think in the literature, I guess you would say, this would be maybe an example of a keyword-driven framework. But the first keyword, the first column is the command. And then you've got the, well, if it's only a 1-parameter command, that's just where you want to go to. But for the type, for example, that's the object that you want to do something to. That's the search box in the Google homepage. And that's the word you want to type into the search box. and then you want to click and wait for a new page. That's the Google search button. So the very kind of simple way to kind of get started. And that's all it was at the beginning. This is what it looked like at the beginning. Kind of crazy. This is Selenium Core. This is what it was for a while. Now this is not so much something you would download and use. You would probably either start, I'll get to it later, Selenium Remote Control or Selenium IDE. But Core is core to both of those things. I can get into some of the limitations of this later, but really, I'll just say, this is the first thing. So you have a test suite. The test suite would load a test in the middle, and then you would click. Well, if you want to click run all the tests in the suite, you click that button. If you want to just run that one test, you click that, and then the page loaded under here. The nice thing about this, I don't have a video, sorry, but I can, like Fit, it's got that style, but when I click play, it starts animating these rows, green or red as it goes, and you get to see the application down here as it's running. So really great visual feedback is what I was really craving, and it was just JavaScript and HTML, so it ran in any browser. So when the iPhone actually came out years ago, I went to this, well, not that URL, but a URL, and I actually was able to run this interface on the iPhone when it first came out. But anyway, so that was the kind of first big thing officially released. But next we have something called Selenium IDE, and that is probably the more appropriate kind of beginner tool. It's probably dangerous to call it a toy, but kind of like the IBO, it's a toy, but really sophisticated toy. Maybe I'll call it that with some smarts inside. This is what this looks like. I'll show a demo at the end. But again, it maintains the echo of Selenium Core and Fit in the sense that we've got this three-parameter, or three-column test. So pretty much everything, even Selenium Remote Control, if you ever wonder why it's just one method and two parameters, it's because of this backward compatibility to these decisions made a long time ago. So Shinya Kasutani in Japan, he's now more famous for creating this iPhone app called Pocket Guitar, which is like hugely successful. So, he also made Selenium IDE, and he made it Firefox specific. The nice thing about this is that it did not have the limitations of Selenium Core. The biggest limitation was you cannot do cross-site scripting or test complicated workflows. A cross-site scripting kind of a thing would be where if you're redirected to some kind of single sign-on page, and then you get your credential and get redirected back, or if you're checking out on some web form where they send you to PayPal, you do something and then you come back to the site. Well, since Selenium was actually just implemented in JavaScript, and we were driving the browser from inside, it didn't have the power to actually go to a different site. It was meant to be testing one domain. And it was fine right at the beginning when the Ajax wave was first taking off, but now people are really bumping up into this limitation. But the IDE does not live in that sandbox, so it actually works pretty well. And so it retains the goodness of Core and it doesn't have the limitations that it had. The next thing that came along from a couple of guys who helped on the project, Paul Hammett, Patrick Lightbody, Nelson Sproul, Dan Fabulich, created this thing called Selenium Remote Control. And the important thing is that quote-unquote real programmers would look at this and shriek in terror because this is not really code. This is actually under the hood. This is HTML. Terrible, actually, if you look at the source. And so Selenium Remote Control lets us kind of have this, lets us have our cake and eat it too, so to speak. You can write your tests in any language, any major language, Java, C#, Perl, Python, Ruby. I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple. And we've got this thing sitting in the middle called the Selenium Remote Control Server, which is really just this web server that proxies requests from these very thin clients and then to the browser. Actually, and in Selenium Core, that JavaScript stuff running in the browser. And so it really kind of orchestrates this requests coming over on one side all the way over to the browser on the other. And great, there's really no screenshot of that since it's like this headless Java server. It's like a screenshot of a web server. The next thing that's come along is Selenium Grid.